In this, our final lesson of this module, we'll be looking at plant processes. Specifically, we'll be covering xylem and phloem, which are the plumbing within the plant, as well as photosynthesis, respiration, photoperiod, transpiration, tropism, dormancy and seasonal growth, and management. The plant plumbing or conducting tissues in the plant are known as xylem and phloem. Xylem carries water and nutrients from the soil to the top part of the plant. Xylem cells are dead at maturity and form hollow tubes. This is important. The portion of the xylem that works is actually dead. You need hollow tubes to carry the water and nutrients. Phloem is the conducting tissue that carries the sugars made by the leaves throughout all parts of the plant. The phloem must be alive to work. So how do you remember which does what? I remember phloem as it carries stuff down, and things flow downhill. So xylem carries stuff up, and though there is living xylem, the xylem that does all the work is dead, and is made up of hollow cells that form tubes. Phloem carries stuff down and must be living in order for it to work. The conducting tissues are arranged differently in grasses and broadleaves. In monocots, the grasses, the xylem and phloem are in vascular bundles. In dicots, the broadleaf plants, the xylem and phloem are in rings. In both cases, the phloem is always to the outside and the xylem to the inside. The cambium is between the two. The cambium is the part of the plant that makes new xylem and phloem. This is a photo of vascular bundles in a monocot. Notice the xylem is to the inside and is made up of hollow tubes. The phloem is to the outside and is not hollow. The cambium is not identified, but is between the xylem and phloem. This is a photo of a cross-section of a tree, a dicot or broadleaf. As always, the phloem is to the outside, the xylem to the inside, and the cambium in between. The cambium is what makes the trunk, branches, and roots grow larger in diameter. So how does this knowledge help us? Let's look at an example. On November 10th of 2014, we had a high of 69 degrees. That night, the temperature dropped to 19. The weather before this date had been very warm, and trees were not hardened off, and they were damaged by this sudden change to low temperatures. However, the damage did not show up until the following year. We saw that damage show up in three different ways. First, trees died over winter and did not green up at all the next spring. Second, trees leafed out and looked good until about June, and then either a branch or the whole tree suddenly died. Or third, the tree looked good until July or August, and then the bark of the trunk started to come off. Eventually, the entire tree died. This is an example. This is an apricot tree that leafed out and looked fine until about June, and then this branch suddenly died. The rest of the tree was fine. In this case, the bark started to come off. The tree is going to die, but it may not look like it, at least not yet. This is the same tree as in the previous slide, but now you can see that the top part of the tree still looks good. How can this be? How can the top part of the tree look good while the living tissues of the trunk have been killed? Remember that the xylem, which carries water and nutrients from the root system, is dead even in healthy trees. Therefore, the top part of the tree is getting all the water and nutrients it needs. However, the phloem and cambium are dead. Since the phloem carries food made in the leaves to the roots, the root system is starving to death. It can live for several months by relying on stored energy reserves, but eventually that stored food runs out. When it does, the root system collapses, and so the top part of the tree dies very quickly. People will say it died overnight. It actually takes longer, but it is very quick. Let's look at a couple of plant processes, photosynthesis and respiration. We will start with photosynthesis. The word photosynthesis combines two words, photo, which means light, and synthesis, which equals making something. So what does photosynthesis make? All photosynthesis makes is sugar. There are a number of different sugars that plants make, but photosynthesis only makes the sugar glucose. Photosynthesis is the reaction that makes sugar. Carbon dioxide from the air, and water from the soil are combined to form sugar and oxygen. This only takes place in the presence of sunlight. We mentioned before that photosynthesis only makes the sugar glucose. The plant uses the glucose as an energy source, but it can also make other sugars, fats, starches, protein, pigments, etc. from glucose as well. By the way, the oxygen given off in this reaction comes from the water, not carbon dioxide. Photosynthesis can be split into two reactions, the light reaction and the dark reaction. In the light reaction, water is split into hydrogen and oxygen, with the hydrogen used to make the sugar glucose and the oxygen released to the atmosphere. The dark reaction takes the hydrogen from the water and carbon dioxide from the air and makes glucose. Just because this is called the dark reaction does not mean it can only take place in the dark. Rather, it means that sunlight is not needed for this reaction to take place. Therefore, it can take place any time that the products of the light reaction are available. Respiration is the opposite of photosynthesis. In respiration, the sugar made in photosynthesis and oxygen are converted to carbon dioxide and water. This releases energy the plant can use. Note that respiration is the same thing we do to get energy. Many people don't realize that plants not only undergo photosynthesis, but also must undergo respiration. Remember, photosynthesis only makes sugar. That sugar must be broken down through respiration in order for the plant to get the energy it needs to stay alive. The energy that is made through the breakdown of sugar is used to convert ADP, adenosine diphosphate, to ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Think of ATP as a fully charged battery and ADP as a dead battery that can be charged over and over again. So this is how this works. Sugar is made in the leaves via photosynthesis. Sugar is then dissolved in water and transported to every living cell in the plant. Inside each cell, the sugar is broken down and the energy released is used to charge up ADP to ATP. The cell can now use the ATP to do whatever it needs to do, just like a battery can be used to power a flashlight, a radio, or any number of things. I want to emphasize this point once more. Photosynthesis and respiration are both necessary for a plant to grow. Photosynthesis makes sugar which stores energy captured from the sun. Respiration breaks down the sugar made in photosynthesis to a form the plant can use to do what it needs to do in order to live and grow. This is a funny looking plant. Potatoes below ground and tomatoes above. Is this possible? Actually, it is. Tomatoes and potatoes are closely related and can be grafted so both potatoes and tomatoes are produced. Traditionally, these grafted plants have not been very productive. However, Thompson and Morgan spent 10 years developing a grafted variety that produces both tomatoes and potatoes. It is marketed under the name of Tomtato and can produce over 500 cherry tomatoes per plant. However, each plant sells for $24. Though this is cool, you can buy a lot of tomatoes and potatoes for $24, and all you have to do is go to the store. You may notice the scientific formula for glucose on the leaf. It is C6H12O6. So glucose is made up of 6 atoms of carbon, 12 of hydrogen, and 6 of oxygen. So glucose is actually a 6-carbon sugar. Let's look at temperature and photosynthesis. The important point here is that the rate of photosynthesis increases with temperature only up to a certain point. Then it levels off and eventually decreases. Photosynthesis in cool season crops is often most efficient between 65 and 70 degrees. Warm season crops are most efficient at 90 to 95 degrees. What you see here is, of course, a warm season crop. This means that photosynthesis doesn't work very well for cool season crops during our Kansas summers. There is plenty of sunlight, but the plant isn't able to take advantage of it. Think of garden peas. They do well in cool spring weather, but tap out when the weather turns hot. This is partially due to photosynthesis not working well at high temps. But what about respiration and temperature? Respiration also increases as temperature increases. Also, it never stops. It continues day and night. This means the hotter the weather, the more sugar a plant burns up. Let's consider our garden peas again. During hot summer weather, they aren't making much sugar because photosynthesis isn't very efficient. On top of that, respiration is burning up a lot of sugar day and night due to those high temps. Eventually, our garden peas run out of energy and die because it's just too hot for them. This slide illustrates how photosynthesis and respiration work together. During the day, photosynthesis must make more energy than it uses or it dies. Actually, it must make enough to not only provide the plant with energy for the day, but also for the night when photosynthesis isn't running, but respiration is. Any excess energy can be stored as starch. Starch can be used to provide the plant with energy when the plant isn't making as much sugar as it is burning. The difference between the energy made by photosynthesis and that burned by respiration is called net photosynthesis, or the photosynthesis-respiration ratio. The photosynthesis-respiration ratio can be quite large, with photosynthesis being 10 to 20 times greater than respiration under ideal conditions. This is good. If the ratio drops to the compensation point where photosynthesis equals respiration, the plant will be in trouble as it has no reserves other than energy that have been stored in the past. There are a number of factors that can affect photosynthesis. We have already mentioned temperature. Next, we'll look at light, water status, and carbon dioxide levels. Let's start with light quantity. On a clear, sunny day in Kansas, we receive 10,000 foot candles of light. During the winter, the light level drops to 1,000 foot candles of light in a clear winter greenhouse. We don't notice that the difference is as large as it is because our eyes adjust. However, plants see this. They have much less light available to grow. If you grow plants inside, levels are even lower. Levels can be as low as about 100 foot candles behind a sheer curtain in a window. There are some plants that can survive with as little as 50 to 70 foot candles of light. There aren't many plants that can survive with such little light, but some can. So how much light is needed to maximize growth? The amount needed for maximum growth is 3,500 foot candles. Anything over 3,500 foot candles does not result in more growth. Growth might actually increase in the summer by using shade cloth to cut down on light. Even with shade cloth, the light levels may still be above 3,500 foot candles, but the heat is reduced as there is less direct sunlight hitting the leaves. Lower heat results in more efficient photosynthesis to make sugar and lower levels of respiration, burning sugar up. Plants don't use all wavelengths of light. It only absorbs wavelengths in the violet and red range. So why are leaves green? It is because the plant reflects those wavelengths rather than absorbing them. So let's say you have an area in the shade under a tree and in the shade on the north side of a building. A light meter tells you that the same amount of light is available in both areas. Ignoring the competition of the tree for water and nutrients, in which area will plants grow better? They will actually grow better on the north side of the building. Though the total amount of light is the same in both areas, the wavelengths that photosynthesis uses have been diminished under the trees because the tree leaves have absorbed them. In order for total light to be the same, other non-used wavelengths have replaced them. So, will a plant grow better under fluorescent grow light compared to a cool white fluorescent lamp? Actually, I haven't given you enough information to know. The answer is no. A grow light does not increase the amount of good wavelengths, but rather filters out those that are not used by photosynthesis. We have a number of grow chambers on campus that we use for research. These chambers are big boxes that are about 3 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 6 feet high. These are designed to control light intensity and duration, humidity and temperature, and are used in some of our studies. We use cool white fluorescent lamps in these rather than grow lights. A plant will only grow better if you use a lamp that puts out more light, move the plant closer to the light, or leave the light on for a longer duration. Light duration is also important for plant growth. Many greenhouses shut down during the coldest part of winter, not only because energy costs are high, but also because we don't have much light in the winter. Not only is intensity much less, but the number of hours of daylight is also much less. In Manhattan, our longest day of the year is 14 hours and 44 minutes, and our shortest day is 9 hours, 15 minutes. That is a difference of 5 hours and 28 minutes. There just isn't enough light energy to grow plants well. Water status also affects photosynthesis. We already know that lack of water causes stomates to close, which results in less gas exchange and more heat in a leaf due to a lack of transpiration. Less gas exchange means less carbon dioxide available to make sugar, and more heat means photosynthesis less efficient during hot summer weather. Not only does too little water cause problems, but so does too much. Too much water drives all the oxygen out of the soil, so all pore spaces are filled with water. The lack of oxygen in the soil will cause the root system to shut down and water uptake to cease. The plant actually shows the same symptoms as too little water, with wilting often occurring. Remember, the reason the roots shut down is that every living cell in the plant has to undergo respiration to get the energy it needs. Too much water means no oxygen. Plants not only react to the intensity and duration of light, but some also react to the number of hours of light they receive. At least that is what we used to think. Now we have found that some plants react to the number of hours of dark they receive rather than the hours of light. These dark hours control when a plant flowers. We can split plants into groups of short-day plants, long-day plants, and day-neutral plants. Short-day plants flower in response to long nights. Many of our short-day plants need about 12 hours of continuous darkness in order to flower. Examples include mums, poinsettia, and soybeans. Though both mums and poinsettias need 12 hours of dark to flower, soybeans need less. Poinsettias are especially sensitive to light. As little as 2 foot candles of light can delay flowering. Everyday mist will require 2 days of dark treatment to make up for it. When I was an undergraduate, one of my professors told of a greenhouse grower that was growing poinsettia for the first time. He knew that night temperatures of 62 to 64 degrees helped the flowers set earlier, but that temperature below 60 degrees would cause root rot. Therefore, he'd enter his greenhouse at midnight each night, walk to the center of the greenhouse where his thermometer was located. He would turn on his flashlight just long enough to read the thermometer, turn it off, and walk out again. All the poinsettias in the center of the greenhouse didn't flower. Headlights from vehicles also can prevent flower, as can a street lamp. A full moon, however, isn't bright enough to hurt anything. It usually takes 40 to 60 days of dark treatment to cause flower buds to form on poinsettia. It takes a total of 8 to 11 weeks from the start of dark treatment to a saleable flower. Greenhouse growers will use shade cloth if there aren't enough hours of dark. This is shade cloth. They'll usually pull it at 5 p.m. and remove it at 8 a.m. for poinsettia. Even though a bit over 12 hours of dark is enough to cause bud set on poinsettia, bud set takes place more quickly at about 14.5 hours. Also notice the lights. We'll talk about those in the next slide. Long-day plants flower in response to short nights. Often less than 8 hours of uninterrupted dark will induce flowering. Examples of long-day plants include sunflower and spinach. Greenhouse growers will light a crop for a period at night to induce flowering. This is an example of how a bench can be lighted. These lights are on a time clock, so the lights come on for 10 minutes in the middle of the night. Each dark period is then short enough that flowering can be induced. Lighting can also be used with short-day plants to delay flowering. Let's say you have started a mum crop in late September. If the crop isn't lighted, the plants will start to flower when they are much too small to be saleable. So you light the crop for 10 minutes in the middle of the night to prevent flowering until the plants are the proper size. Many plants will flower regardless of the length of night. These are called day-neutral plants. Examples include tomatoes, roses, and tulips. There are also some plants that will bloom regardless of the day length, but may bloom better under either short day or long day conditions. For example, petunias prefer long days, but cosmos prefers short days. In this section, we're going to cover a couple of different subjects that don't fit neatly under one umbrella. We will start with transpiration. Transpiration is a process by which water is absorbed by the roots, passed through the plant, and lost from the leaves. About 90% of the water a plant absorbs is lost in this way. Transpiration not only helps to cool the plant during hot weather, but also carries nutrients from the roots throughout the plant. The remaining 10% of the water that is absorbed is used in photosynthesis, in which water molecule is split into hydrogen and oxygen. Remember, the oxygen a plant gives off comes from this process. Water is also lost from the soil surface due to evaporation. These two processes together are called evapotranspiration as a measure of water used by a crop. The amount of evapotranspiration can be used to determine how much irrigation is needed to keep the crop growing at an optimal level without wasting water. There are different kinds of dormancy that a plant may go through. Endodormancy occurs when a plant won't grow due to factors within the meristem. For example, a chilling requirement where a certain number of chilling hours must be met before the plant will break bud in the spring. Chilling hours are hours between 32 and 45 degrees. Apples, for example, can't be grown in Texas if you go too far south. They just don't receive enough hours between 32 and 45 degrees in the winter. Paradormancy takes place when a plant won't grow due to factors outside the meristem, but within the plant. An example we gave earlier in this presentation is that of an apical bud preventing growth from buds lower on the stem. Removing the apical bud will allow the lower buds to break and grow. Remember the mum video we had earlier? This same procedure is also used with blackberries and raspberries, where we remove the top inch of growth to greatly increase yield. Ecodormancy occurs when a plant won't grow due to environmental conditions such as cold or lack of water. Tall fescue does not have a chilling requirement, but will not grow in winter due to cold temperatures unless there is a warm spell. Even then, growth is minimal due to cold soil temps. Plants can be annuals, biennials, or perennials. Annuals are plants that complete their life cycle in one season. Most annuals are summer annuals that germinate in the spring, flower in summer, and die in the fall. Examples include our annual flowers such as petunias. Winter annuals germinate in the fall, spend the winter as small plants, and flower in the spring. They die when summer turns hot in the summer. Examples would include some of our lawn weeds, such as henbit and chickweed. Biennials are flowers that take 2 seasons to complete their life cycle. The first year, the plant grows but produces no flowers. The second year, the plant flowers and then dies. Foxglove and hollyhock are biennials, even though there are some varieties that act as annuals and bloom the first year. Herbaceous perennials live from year to year but die to the ground each fall. Our perennial flowers such as hosta, iris, and peony are examples. Woody perennials would include trees, shrubs, and woody vines that have above-ground parts that survive the winter and live for many years. Our goal for growth varies depending on the type of plant we have. With vegetables and annual flowers, we want maximum growth for high yields of vegetables and annual plants covered with flowers. With perennial flowers, we desire moderate growth so that we only have to divide the plants every several years instead of every year. What we actually want with a new landscape is for growth early on to be very fast and then slow down so the plants are in the sweet spot for a long time. However, that is not possible, so we want moderate growth so the plants don't outgrow their spot or need excessive maintenance such as pruning. Minimal growth is desired for mature landscapes and often for lawns. If growth for mature landscapes is slow, less pruning and maintenance is needed. If lawns are slow growing, then less mowing is required. However, slow-growing lawns are also slow to recover from damage. Tropism is growth directed by environmental influences. For example, phototropism is growth influenced by light. If you've ever grown tomato seedlings on a windowsill, you have seen this. The seedlings bend toward the light. Plants use this in order to get the maximum amount of light to each leaf. If a side branch on a tree is shaded by growth further up that plant, it will grow toward the light so it can make better use of the energy from the sun. Geotropism is a reaction to gravity. Roots naturally grow down and shoots grow up. Thigmotropism is a reaction to touch. Can you think of plants that react to touch? Venus flytrap and sensitive plants are two that come to mind. Actually, many plants react to touch. Did you know that tomato seedlings grown indoors under lights will be shorter and stockier if you run your hand over the top of them 10 times in the morning and 10 times at night? That is a reaction to touch. Of course, you must have enough light so that the plants don't become leggy, but with plenty of light, this works. Poinsettia growers use plant growth regulating compounds to make plants shorter and denser than they would normally be, as these plants are more attractive to consumers. These compounds mimic what the plant does naturally, but just to a greater degree. Well, that is it for Plant Growth and Development module. What you have had in this module is equivalent of at least a 3-hour college course as far as the breadth of material is concerned. As we mentioned earlier, we do not expect anyone to be able to absorb this information this fast. However, it is available for review, and many concepts will be revisited in later modules. Thank you for your attention.